that you? Hi, everybody, and a good Friday, and welcome to our first official Hurricane HQ&A here on Facebook and YouTube. So this is something that we put in new this hurricane season so that we can interact better, more efficiently, and more completely with you guys if we have a threat. And we thought if you were watching your Facebook feed earlier this week, you might have seen us testing, and hopefully you participated in the testing. We had hundreds of people send us in questions and comments and so forth just in our tests. So anyway, we're doing it today, not because there's obviously any kind of significant threat out there, but because we want to make this aware, make you aware of this, and we want to test our equipment. So Jordan Overton is at headquarters in New York. I'm in South Florida. And Jordan, there's Jordan. Hi, Jordan. And Jordan is going to monitor the comments and questions that come in from you guys, and then we're going to address them as we go. So we ask that if you do want to ask a question, that you put a Q: in front of the question, and that'll just help us sort through them better and more efficiently. And if you want to make a comment, that's okay too. Always very good to hear from you. And we're interested in who is watching and how far are you and why are you watching and so forth. So, indeed, your comments are welcome. But before we start that, let's talk about what's going on out there in the tropics right now. We have two things to talk about. One of them is here in the Gulf of Mexico, and it's this area of disturbed weather here. And hang on just one second. Let me get my computer to work better here. There we go. Okay, so it's this area of disturbed weather here that the National Hurricane Center has an X out there, and in this area, a 10% chance that it could develop before the X ends up over here in Texas later on today. Is it going to develop a circulation? Obviously, they have 10% on it, so the odds are very, very low, and it is indeed quite unlikely. All right, let's take a look at the satellite here, and you can make out the turning in here. That's what they're keying in on. You can also see this is part of a kind of a broad circulation that's bringing moisture up here. So we've got good thunderstorms going all the way from the Florida Panhandle, and then, of course, over related to the disturbance here over approaching the Texas coast. And a lot of this is going to affect Louisiana as well. And again, another day of some real tropical downpours. Now, when we put the circulation on it, this is from the European model, we can see here that this is a kind of a broad circulation. There's nothing unified there. And I think if you look at the way those upper clouds are blowing there. You see them kind of blowing that way. And look here, when you get these thunderstorms blow up, you can kind of see the upper clouds, the wispy white clouds, are all blowing to the southeast or southwest. And the reason for that is there's upper level winds coming across it like this that are pretty hostile. And that's why the odds are low here that this thing is going to be able to develop a unified circulation. You can see everything is kind of blowing off in this direction here, and those winds are all across the northern Gulf. So that's obviously one of the things we look at when we kind of wonder, could this thing develop? Put the radar on it, and you can see where the strongest thunderstorms are. Look, there's a whole batch here of thunderstorms coming into the Florida Panhandle here, and some of these are quite heavy, so just be on the lookout for that. Real tropical downpours, because this is tapping into tropical air that's been feeding up from the south. Not so much related to this disturbance, but now related to high pressure off the east coast of the U.S. And then here are the thunderstorms with the disturbance, and you can see they're going to push in toward Texas. And all of this is going to get enhanced as we get into the afternoon hours and the heating of the day and so forth. So kind of typical, but all of this is less than it was yesterday, which is less than it was the day before. And it's all less than it was with, remember, Invest 93L 2 weeks ago. This is a similar scenario, but just not as strong a system. All right, here we have what the model shows, and there you see our circulation right in there. Here you can see the moisture feeding in. This is what's going to trigger thunderstorms today. And here you can see this kind of circulation around here, broad circulation bringing moisture into Texas. The darker the green, the deeper the moisture. So generally you get higher rain rates where you have deep green. Obviously we have that moved in there into the Houston metropolitan area. All right, going forward in time here, and up here is going to, in the upper left, is going to show you where we are in terms of the time. So here we are Saturday. Now notice the moisture has moved here into Texas, up in the Rio Grande Valley. And look over here. This is very dry air pushing over Florida. So this weekend, it's going to be significantly drier in the atmosphere, although it's always kind of humid down at the ground. And generally over the southeast, there is moisture there, but it's much thinner than it has been, and we're not as expecting the kind of downpours that we have seen. As a matter of fact, as the moisture decreases in the atmosphere, the temperatures are going back up. So we're looking for very hot conditions again in the south and extending all the way up into the Midwest with that heat dome high coming back in. You're going to have combination of humidity and extreme heat. So the feels like temperatures, the heat index, up in the 110-degree range again, and some places across the south. All right, so let's look out in the Atlantic here because this is just a little bit interesting. I mean, there's mostly nothing out there. Here we have a little tropical disturbance, and you can see a few of them moving on across as they come across Africa. But notice there's not much with them because there's a lot of dry air. Here you can see all these clear skies. Look at the clear skies out in here. Just a lot of dry air across the Atlantic. But there is a moisture path as well. And when we look at the water temperatures, this is kind of interesting because here's where the main development region is, and we call it that because that's where the biggest storms form. They have this long runway from Africa to get going by the time they get off to the west, so it's called the main development region, or the MDR. Well, if you notice, the warm water out here is only in the very southern part of the main development region and farther south. We're a little too early in the year. This is going to migrate north as we go in the summer here. But right now, any kind of a system that came off of Africa into this green area would have a real hard time for the water temperature reason, let alone all the dry air. So we need, if a system is going to go west, it's going to have to start pretty low and then move north and kind of avoid this cool water. But again, I keep saying the dry air because the dry air is such a big thing. While we're looking at this, look how warm the Gulf is, way up in the 80s here. The Caribbean has actually cooled off a little bit. So it's in the 80s. It's plenty warm to support a system, but it is cooler than it was. All right, then look at the dust and compare that to the box. And remember that warm water was all down in here. So the question is, what's going to happen with the dust and the storm track and so forth? So let's try and look at that. Here we are today with the dust. Look, it looks like a plume coming off here, but notice we have thinner areas in here. So this disturbance down here is blowing up a little bit more because the dust is not right there. Where when we look over on the west here, then it's really getting squashed by the dust, anything that would come off. But let's go forward in time and keep your eye up here on the timeline. And here we go. Here we are today. Oh, one other thing I wanted to mention here. Look at this flow coming in here from the north. That's kind of pulling in dry air from the north too. So we have not just dust, we also have dry air that's rotating around. Here's another batch of it here. So this display you have really is showing you the dust, but also there is very dry air caused by high pressure to the north as well. Okay, let's go forward in time here. And what I want you to notice is we get up to Monday. Again, we're looking up here in the upper left for the time period. We get to Monday. If you notice, the dust is kind of lifted north a little bit here. And so we have a little bit of a gap. So that Monday time frame, this coming Monday, if a system comes off of Africa, it might have a better chance of developing, and that's indeed what we're going to talk about here. All right, now let's go forward here again, watching the time up here. Here we go, Tuesday, Wednesday, and notice that thin area is over in here by Friday, a week from now. So there is what's going to happen as we go farther into the year are these pockets are going to develop where a tropical disturbance has a better chance of developing. There's still dust out there, you see, but it's thinner, and indeed the air is drier there. So we'll see exactly how that's going to work. Well, another thing we can look at is the upper level winds. And again, here we are Monday. Remember, Monday was when that disturbance might come off of Africa. And if you notice, the upper level winds are kind of moderately hostile there, just slightly. But we have plenty of areas nearby with very little strong upper level winds where the dark blues are. Think of it, the dark blue is the conducive area, and the reds up here are the hostile areas. And we have very little hostility over in here, relatively little anyway. All right, let's go forward in time. Here we are on Monday, and watch as we go across the Atlantic. You see this kind of push coming in here. Wednesday, okay, we're in here somewhere with that disturbance again. Just moderately a little bit hostile maybe, but not too bad. And then looking forward in time as we get to a week from now. So we have an area in here that looks a bit conducive, but hostile upper level winds right here nearby. So it's not like this is pristine or anything, or an August or September kind of look. And now we have something new that we haven't had before this hurricane season, and that's this ability to look at what the various models do and where they cluster. And what we're going to look at for here is where we get a cluster of different computer forecasts, because that gives us some confidence that that might happen, because more of these different forecasts using different formulae come up with basically a similar answer. So here you see this cluster. So here we are Wednesday. Remember that disturbance was going to come off on Monday. So here's a cluster right in here. And we're going to watch that as we go forward in time. Okay, so here we go. Watch as they go. And you see that heading kind of across the Atlantic with that pocket of slightly less hostile wind. And just to tell you what we're looking at here with these various colors, here are the models up here at the top. And here we see the reddish models. Here, that's the GFS and the ECMWF. In this case, it's the ECMWF. And then the blue ones, that's the new Google AI experimental model. And then the European Center's AI model is in green. Now, we don't have a whole lot of them here, which what that tells you is that none of the models are really determined that something's going to happen. What this is telling us, that this is a place for us to look, because this really is not a very big cluster. As we see this develop later on in the year, we're going to see a lot more consensus. But this is some consensus, and the first one we've seen this year. So honestly, we're looking at it because we have the new technology to show it. And it's the first one this year that has kind of shown some cohesion as it's moved on across the Atlantic. So something to keep an eye on this coming week, with the idea that it would be in the general area of the islands. Maybe, this is a very big maybe, late in the week, weekendish time frame. So keep an eye on that. One other thing to talk about, and that's out in the Pacific. Are we going to have an El Nino or La Nina? And remember, if you've been watching, the thinking is it's been going to be closer to neutral. Well, it's headed a little bit. Look, this box is where we look, and notice it's kind of more blue than yellow. It used to be kind of half blue and half yellow. Now it's more blue, and indeed heading more toward a La Nina, La Nina being more conducive for tropical activity in the Atlantic. But we'll see. We'll see. It's just trending that way. Doesn't mean it's going to keep doing that. It tends to go up and down. So the bottom line on this, I guess, is if you had to forecast this, if it's going to happen, it's going to be later in the hurricane season to having some kind of impact. So that would put more emphasis on late September and October, just based on what the La Nina could be doing here at this point. Okay, so let's go ahead and see who has commented, who has written in, and what do you have there, Jordan, that we can talk about.
First question right there from Ginny.
From Ginny Inez, are you all going to use AI? Well, yeah. So yes, you saw it in action there for the first. Well, we actually have used a little bit of it on Fox Weather now and then, but yes, we're watching especially closely the European Center AI model called the AIFS, and the Google experimental AI model, and that's what they call it, the Google experimental AI model. We'll call it Google AI. So yes, we're going to include that with the typical models, the European and the GFS model. The testing that's been done on those AI models has shown to be quite reliable and worth considering when we consider these sort of forecasts, especially long-range forecasts. So you gave you a little sample of that just a moment ago. All right, question. I always have experts say hurricanes don't like high pressure, but I also have them say hurricanes need high pressure to develop properly. I'm confused. Can you explain also what moves a high pressure system? So let's start with the second part of the question first. High pressure systems are bubbles of air. So if you think about what causes the weather, it starts with what causes the weather. The weather is caused by the spinning of the Earth, and you have the atmosphere on that, and because of the Earth is a ball, that means that the near the equator, that part of the Earth is moving faster than farther north, and that causes the air to start moving on the ball, on the sphere of the Earth. So then it starts bumping into mountains, and then it starts because there's less friction over the land, over the water than there is over the land. That affects things. And then there are temperature differences that affect the air differently, and that causes the air to move. And so you have all these things happening all at the same time. And as a result of that, we end up with the air kind of piling up in some places and having dips in other places. Where it piles up, that's high pressure. Where it dips, that's low pressure. And things move because the Earth is spinning, essentially. That keeps things moving generally from west to east, although in the tropics, because we have the Earth spinning faster at the tropics, we get things going the other direction, actually, and that's the bottom of the high pressure. I was going to try and go forward here. In fact, tell you what, since we're all doing kind of an experimental thing here, let me do it a different way, and I'll go right to the graphic that I wanted to show you. And let me see if this just pops right up like it's supposed to. Okay, there it is. So what you see here is the high pressure is generally up in here, the Bermuda High, it's called. So the flow around the Bermuda High is like that in some fashion. Now, the edges change right now, and for this year, boy, it has been very persistent coming up into here and bringing the tropical moisture up into the south and over Florida, of course. But generally, that's the flow. So here in the tropics, we get things going this way. Here farther north, you get things going back that way around that bubble of high pressure. So hopefully that gives you an idea of the of how all that works. And obviously, it's a lot more complicated than that. Okay, where does naming tropical storms and invest come from, and what does the number mean? Well, okay, first of all, tropical storms and hurricanes, the lists of names, and there are 7 of them, but 6 of them are in rotation, so every 6 years. So, for example, this year, the D storm, which would be the next storm, will be Dexter. But Dexter was a replacement for Dorian, because Dorian got obviously retired because of that hellacious hurricane in the northwestern Bahamas 6 years ago. So this list that's come around has that name replaced. The names are chosen by the World Meteorological Organization Region 4 Committee. Region 4 is our part of the world here, and the lead agency is the National Hurricane Center in Miami. And they have a meeting every year, and they talk about what they want to retire, because a nation can say, we want to retire Dorian because it had such an effect on us. We don't want to have another Dorian. And so they retire that and they replace it in those lists of 6 names. There is a 7th list of names that's used if we use up the whole list in a year, like we have a couple times, and then they revert to the 7th list that just sits there and just waits for a super busy year when we use up all the names. Now, the invests are a different thing. The invests come from an internal system at the National Hurricane Center. It was never really intended for public use, but here we are in the modern world, so now it's a public thing. And they just have this convention that they start numbering at 90 and they go to 99, they go back to 90. So every time they want to investigate something, but it's not organized enough to get a name or to be a tropical depression, then it just gets the next number in the 90s. And yes, it's arcane and weird, and hopefully someday they'll do something that's not quite so internal, but that's what we have right now. Okay, Mike asks from YouTube, how will this impact move inland in Texas this weekend? Well, the moisture is going to move into Texas as we were showing here. So let me go back to here where we look at the model. And you can get an idea here. Obviously, this is where we are right now. You can get an idea. This is not 100%. This is a computer forecast obviously, but there is where the where you see the dark green is where the moisture is now. And as we go forward in time here, the moisture kind of pushes off into Texas, rotates around, and then the system just dies out. But there will be this tropical moisture from northern Mexico up into the hill country of Texas, in the Rio Grande Valley, and so forth. So, check your local forecast there for any concern about heavy tropical rain, flash flooding, and so forth, just in case that turns out to be an issue. That would be Saturday into Sunday. It's all just going to eventually dissipate, but there will be additional above average tropical moisture in Texas, is the thinking of that's the European model you're looking at right there. George Sheldon. Hi, George. Please explain for everyone how the MJO has an effect on the MDR. Okay, the MDR, remember, is that the development region in the Atlantic there that we talked about, the main development region there. It's this box. Sometimes the box, by the way, is drawn and it stops here at the Caribbean and it's just this part. And sometimes it's the whole box. So for today, we'll just use the whole box. And this is where so many of the big hurricanes come from, because they have that long runway of time over the warm water later on in the year. Now, the MJO is a completely different thing. The MJO is a pulse, this kind of this broad-based pulse that revolves around the world, and as it comes by, it enhances storm development. And as it goes past, then it suppresses storm development. We've been in generally a suppressive phase this hurricane season over the Atlantic. This is not okay, absolutely routine, here it comes, there it goes kind of thing. The MJO pulses can be weak, they can slow down, they can dissipate. So we had one that came along and enhanced the crap out of the Eastern Pacific there for a while, and then it just died out and didn't go into the Atlantic. We thought it might get to the Atlantic and enhance activity in Atlantic, but it just kind of died out. So they originate over Southeast Asia, essentially, Indonesia, and then they slowly move across the Pacific, and it takes nominally 40 days to go around. But the thing is, they don't always go around. Sometimes they just are weak and die out, or we can't detect them, and they don't have much effect. But we watch it, especially as we get here toward the heart of the hurricane season. It really, once the ocean water is plenty warm, they really can trigger more thunderstorm development, and that energy is what triggers the development of tropical storms and hurricanes. So that's what we're going to watch for later on as we get going here. Okay, Darth Vader 33. Hi, Mike from Miami. Hi, thanks for tuning in and watching you since the great, I guess that's Andrew. And yes, it's the 33rd anniversary. Can you imagine 33 years since Hurricane Andrew? What do you remember vividly about the bunker? Well, yeah, that was an kind of unforgettable moment in my life. A couple of things that I remember vividly. One is that the bunker, which was actually a storage closet on the edge of the studio, was not part of our plan, and I didn't really come up with the idea until the middle of the night. And because I was looking at the roof and I was very, very familiar with the old WTVJ building in downtown Miami. And I knew that it was a really strong building, but the roof had a bunch of equipment on it. And I thought, boy, if something flies off a high rise across the street and smashes into the roof, that would not be good for us in the studio. But then almost immediately I thought, you know what? We're telling people to get to a hallway, get to a safe spot. And I thought, this is crazy for us to be sitting on this fancy news set here. So we made arrangements, and we did all this right live on TV. Talked to the floor director and talked to the production manager, John Lugering and Bruce Carter, and said, let's make a place for us that's safer. You got to have a safe place there. And they made the closet, and it just turned out that we were looking on the news desk at the wall of the studio, and right behind that wall, there was this storage area that had concrete steps above it because it used to be an old theater. And so this was kind of under the steps in the theater. And when that theater had been converted to a studio in the 50s, that just ended up being a storage area on the side of the studio for lights and so forth. Anyway, they whipped that up in no time, and we decided to make the move at 3:30, which of course many people have seen, and it's on YouTube. And it was a moment, and I can picture walking in there with Tony Segreto still already sitting there with the microphone and trying to figure out exactly how we were going to do phone calls and doing all this on the fly live on TV as this incredible storm was bearing down. So it was a moment for sure.
Yeah, the
Uh,
Mike just gave us an update to his question there, Brian. So it's mentioning the great Ann Bishop, and then
And
obviously,
Bishop, yes.
yeah,
Well, I
yeah.
worked, well, so Ann and I worked together at WPLG in the 80s. By the time Hurricane Andrew happened, I had moved to WTVJ. Um, but Ann, working with Ann, and there's a video on YouTube of um, me working and me and Bishop in a very funny moment. I was filling in for Don No on the 11 o'clock news, and there was some kind of weather event, a flood of some sort, I think, in a place called Toadsuck, Arkansas. And I knew that Anne would love something like that. So I brought the little bulletin out with me to the set. Anyway, you can find it on YouTube if you look up Bryan Norcross and Ann Bishop on WPLG. That was probably 88 or 89, something like that. Crazy, huh? Mark Bolts, how significantly has forecasting accuracy improved, and why over the last 10 or 15 years can we expect more of the same? So the main reason that forecasts are better now than they were 10 or 15 years ago is because the computers are more powerful, and that means that we can process more data. The data that gets processed is put on a grid. It's a fancy grid. It's not just a typical grid, but it lays over the Earth. And at these grid points, the calculations are made all the way around the Earth. And so the more grid points you have, the better you understand the weather, because there are small features in the weather and there are big features in the weather. We normally have forecast the big features pretty well, but now we're getting to forecast the smaller features that you probably heard of the butterfly effect, right? Well, think of this as the butterfly effect is that a small thing now can have a big effect downstream, and that's part of chaos theory, and one of the reasons we'll never be able to forecast the weather perfectly. But when we get a higher resolution, we make generally better forecasts. And also some better computer techniques have come along as well that we can do and run on these bigger supercomputers. So that's the big reason forecasts have gotten better, and how that is going to jibe with AI and what we know about AI. And as we get the AI runs on bigger, has scale is the word they use. Is that going to improve the weather forecast? I mean, all of this is very, very new, obviously, and so there's a lot of learning going on. But the initial impression of the AI forecast is very good, and originally it was thought, okay, these things really work well for track, but how about for intensity? And to do intensity, you have to understand exactly what's going on, the mechanics of what's going on inside the hurricane. And there's some indication that as we get higher resolution data into the AI models, that maybe it can understand intensity better and figure that out. So anyway, this is the first year that we're really getting a look at this in real time with real hurricanes. We can go back and run past hurricanes, but now with real hurricanes and real modern data, we're going to see with AI, and it has made a dramatic difference. Now, will the forecast continue to get better in the future? That's a great question. The answer is probably yes, but not at the same rate. The rate of improvement, it's kind of flattening out, but it's continuing to go down in terms of the average errors a little bit at a time. All right, Jordan, we have another question there?
So just very quickly mentioning, you got people from everywhere joining in. Here's Robert from Key Largo, Florida. We've had a couple people from North Carolina. So again, thank you everybody across the country going in. Yeah, our next question here is from Dwayne Clark.
All right, Dwayne says, is there a chance that things will pick up around August or September? Well, so I mean, normally the hurricane season picks up the middle of August, right? If you look at that slope, I wish I had that graphic, but the slope just goes zoom in the middle of August. Yeah, I don't have it in my graphics here, Jordan. The seasonal graphic. I don't know if you have access to a system there, you can pull that up. But in any case, we'll get it another time, and I think everybody can visualize it. But it really goes up the middle of August. So the real hurricane season really starts in the middle of August. As a matter of fact, Dr. Bill Gray, the famous Bill Gray, who created essentially the science of seasonal hurricane forecasting at Colorado State in the 80s, and they did their first forecast in 1984. He used to ring a bell on the 20th of August that was okay, here it is. This is the beginning of hurricane season. So yes, well, in this year where we have relatively cool Atlantic compared to the last 2 years, then you'll see that it takes the Atlantic's going to have to warm more like average before things start happening in a big way between the Caribbean and Africa. And the dry air, the dust generally lets up slowly in August, so that by the middle of August, it's not as big a factor on average. So yes, we expect that things will, no reason to think that they won't pick up. And as we go later on here, into the season, get into the heart of the season. I don't know, Jordan, can you punch up that graphic that I see?
Give me just a sec here, almost to it.
Okay. All right. So anyway, yes, there's no reason to think that we're not going to have a hurricane season.
We'll get another question while I'm working on that.
Okay.
Right here.
All right.
So,
And if you get it a little bit,
there we go.
We'll get it. All right. Canes Cats Heat 305. Obviously, from the 305. 305 is the old Miami area code. That was the whole state of Florida area code, by the way, when I was a kid. So I'm 25 years old. We haven't had a major hurricane in my lifetime. How can we prepare for a future Cat 5? Well, you prepare for a Cat 5 the same way you prepare for a Cat 4 or a Cat 3, any kind of, and really how you prepare for a hurricane. So you figure out how you're going to take care of yourself, depending on where you live, right? Do you live in an area that you have to evacuate, first of all, and you evacuate because of storm surge, and Miami-Dade County has a storm surge map, which is the worst I think I've ever seen. But they do have a way you can put in your address and learn if you're in an evacuation zone. If you're anywhere near water, including near canals, you can be in an evacuation zone. If you're in South Dade, Homestead, all the way up into the southern reaches of I don't know, the southern part of Kendall it's hard to draw the line where exactly that is, but the coastal ridge that protects much of the county kind of peters out right around Cutler Bay. So down around 200th Street, more or less. So if you're up in that area, you have the potential for flooding in just a catastrophic hurricane. So understanding whether you have to evacuate, obviously that's a key one. But also, do you live in an area that is kind of flat and if it rains hard is prone to flooding? Because if we have a tremendous rain like happened in Harvey and Houston, then the western parts of Miami-Dade, Broward, and Broward County are going to be flooded, and that flooding is going to stay there for a good while. It only goes down at about an inch a day. So if you get a couple feet of rain, a few feet of rain, like they had up to 5 feet of rain in Houston, say we get 3 feet of rain, it's going to be there for weeks, and you might be stranded at home. So if you're in a situation where you're stranded at home, how are you going to take care of yourself? Obviously, people that have the food and the water and the stuff prepared, they're going to be in a lot better shape than people that that don't. So, understanding your situation, do you live in a modern house? Good thing is in Miami and Miami-Dade County and Broward County and even good parts of Florida, not everywhere in Florida, but good parts of Florida, the homes are very strong and you will be safe in the home if you're not in an evacuation zone. Jamie Thomas, why do some hurricanes have larger eyes than others? Yes, hurricanes come in every variety, and some have giant eyes. Think we don't know where Jamie is writing in on YouTube, but if you're so you're a South Florida person and you were here in 2005 for Hurricane Wilma. Hurricane Wilma had this giant eye by the time it got to South Florida, but it started out in the Caribbean with an ultra tiny eye, only about 2 miles across. I mean, it was this super pinhole eye that none of us had ever seen before. And when you get the super pinhole eye, the idea of the figure skater spinning and bringing in the arms and spinning faster and faster when the arms are really, the maximum speed. So that's when, and you get the lowest pressure. That's when we got the 882 millibars with Wilma. But as it moved and it interacted with Texas and got disrupted and then reformed, very often what happens is the eye gets bigger as it reforms, and sometimes it gets bigger into a state that gets kind of stable. We saw this with Hurricane Francis in 2004 as well. Came in with this kind of giant eye. It was kind of in a stable configuration, a gyre type configuration. That happened in Wilma. So storms that last a while, their eyes grow and shrink and grow and shrink, and sometimes when they get disrupted, they end up with just a large eye. Sometimes, thankfully not very often, but sometimes you have a giant storm that has a giant eye. That happened in Miami, the Great Miami Hurricane of 1926, that the center of the storm, if you're a 305 person, Palmetto Bay, which is well south of Miami, must be 10 miles south of Miami. That's where the center came in, but the downtown Miami was in the eye, in the northern part of the eye, and mid Miami Beach was out of the eye. And then, but that storm was so large that it took out Hollywood and it took out Dania, and it flooded downtown Fort Lauderdale. And it flooded downtown West Palm Beach. I mean, this not catastrophically in West Palm Beach, but did a lot of damage in Fort Lauderdale, terrible damage in the southern part of Broward County and throughout Dade County at the time. So storms just come in all these varieties, and the eyes get bigger through internal processes, and sometimes because they get disrupted, and that's how they reform.
So we
All right, there's the graph we were talking about a moment ago. And there you can see, if you look at August, the yellows are the named storms, the reds are the hurricanes, and just look at it ramping up, how it ramps up. So it goes along, ramps up a little bit when we get to August, and then about the middle of August, just zooms up. So that's what I was talking about. So 92% of the average activity is remaining in activity we define by the amount of energy in the tropics. So we've got a long way in hurricane season to go. All right. Another question from the 305. How rare of an occurrence was the situation with Otis? Yeah, so the situation with Otis was that we had this tropical storm that was forecast to maybe not even make landfall and weaken off the coast. That was the consensus of the standard computer models. And instead, it ended up being a Category 5, and it hit about a day and a half later with and just mauled Acapulco. It was the biggest forecasting failure of that I remember in modern times here anyway, since we've been kind of expecting forecasts to be pretty good. and but that was real. There were a lot of unusual things there because of where it was located. It was kind of far for the hurricane hunters. So we only got one flight in there, and when they went, oh my God, this is stronger than we were expecting, and that gave the folks in Acapulco some warning. So that was good, but they don't have radar there, so there wasn't any way to really see it by radar. I could only by satellite, and it happened to be in this fairly small pocket of very warm water. And so it was a confluence of really unfortunate things. But it's really rare, and no, Otis wouldn't happen in the Atlantic or in Florida because we would have hurricane hunters in there and lots more, just lots more data that to feed in. So here you can see on the 24th the difference between it's a tropical storm there at 8 a.m. and it's a Category 5 hurricane at 11 p.m. Just absolutely stunning. Again, a small storm. Small storms spin up really quickly, and just this horrible confluence of events there that happened to go right over Acapulco. Interesting thing, if you go on the look up the Google experimental tool, what they call Weather Lab, you can go back and look at Otis and look at what the Google model forecasts based on the data that was available. And it actually does better than the traditional models. And it shows the storm going toward Acapulco as a reasonably strong storm, but not a Category 5, but still a much better forecast than the traditional models were producing there. So again, that's one of the things that gives us some hope that adding the AI models into the tool set will allow us to not miss key forecasts like happened with Otis. All right, Jordan,
All
what
right,
do we
yeah.
have?
So we have Sabrina Murphy asking, do you think the hurricane rating system should change and have a Category 6? We're seeing stronger and stronger storms, and the expanded rating would be valuable historically.
Well, yeah, people have been talking about this Category 6 idea. No, I'm not in favor of that because that would imply that there's something worse than a Category 5. And yes, the winds can be stronger, but the idea of a Category 5 is you have catastrophic damage. Now, we do have, I mean, honestly, in the modern world, especially in South Florida and also elsewhere where buildings are built to the what was the Miami-Dade building code, and now it's this South Florida high wind code, where buildings are built like battleships here, and they will withstand Category 5 winds, but the community can still be devastated even with these modern buildings standing. So that's a little different than it was back when the rating system was created, which was back in the 70s. Herb Saffer, the Miami architect, great Miami architect and a great guy, came up with it originally and took it to Simpson, who was the director of the National Hurricane Center, and then they did some work on it to add storm surge and pressure, and it became the Saffer-Simpson scale. And then they eventually took that out. But Herb Saffer originally just had it based on damage in these various categories. You see catastrophic damage when you get up to the Category 4 and Category 5. So to me, we don't need a Category 6. The bigger issue is to get people to understand that their wind is just one hazard in the storm, and that Category 2s can have devastating storm surge. Hurricane Ike that hit the Bolivar Peninsula near Houston, for example. And we have to pay attention to all these hazards. The tornado hazard that we saw in Milton, Palm Beach County, and up in the Treasure Coast here on the east coast of Florida, huge, devastating tornadoes. So anyway, that's the main thing that we need is we need people to be aware of all of the hazards, including the freshwater flooding hazard, obviously thinking about Helene last year in Western North Carolina.
All right, coming up next, just actually have a viewer from the United Kingdom. He's asked a couple questions now. I just brought up one of them. He's really interested how the Atlantic tropical systems impact the United Kingdom, the pressure patterns, the clouds, the moisture in Texas, just kind of like how does that impact them?
Well, the tropical systems can impact the United Kingdom, or we're talking about Ireland generally, because Ireland is kind of sticking out to the west, but sometimes southern England as well. They're rarely, I mean, super rarely, tropical in nature. Usually, what happens is the hurricane goes north over the cold air and merges with a northern latitude system and quits running off of the warm water and starts running off of the cold air, meeting the warm air, and that powers it. And they can be very powerful storms moving across the North Atlantic, and those are the ones that impact the United Kingdom. Now, when they are really bad, usually those northern systems have incorporated a lot of tropical air, but the storm is not a tropical storm, but sometimes it can feel kind of tropical because the air is unusually moist when the system gets there. So it's all part of the evolution of the systems, but the hurricanes don't actually travel to England. Something sticks in my mind though that a few years ago one almost did, right? I don't know. Maybe somebody will remind me of exactly what that was. But in general, I was there one time, as a matter of fact, landing in London when a tropical air mass. It was a low pressure system, a North Atlantic low pressure system, but kind of with a tropical air mass came in, and I think we had a tornado. There was a tornado. We didn't have it. There was a tornado in England as part of that system. This was a good number of years ago.
All right, next up we have Avery.
All right.
With a question: will any hurricanes be hitting the Bahamas?
Yeah. Well, will any hurricanes be hitting the Bahamas or Florida or the Gulf? Or we don't know. We don't know. I mean, obviously, Nassau and all the Bahamas are right in the hurricane zone. So the good thing is that buildings are built and people understand hurricanes in the Bahamas. So it's rare that we have a lot of fatalities in the Bahamas because of just a good culture of hurricanes and construction and so forth. But certainly the Bahamas could very well experience a hurricane as they have in the past. By the way, I was going to add to remember the chart I was showing you, just to give you an idea how kind of late August and September and October loaded the hurricane season is in Florida. The earliest significant hurricane, like Category 3 and above hurricane to hit South Florida was Hurricane Andrew, and that's August 24th. So just generally don't have big hurricanes affecting at least this part of Florida. Obviously, we can have hurricanes. We in the Gulf in June, Hurricane Audrey in '57 and others, but not generally big hurricanes in South Florida until we get to late August, September, and October. And October is a rival with September and maybe a little ahead in terms of the number of storms. The big storms normally happen in September when you get this maximum heating of the water and conduciveness of the upper level winds across the tropics. Can hurricanes still spin up in the deep tropics like the Caribbean? Yeah, sure, Mike, they can. The water is plenty warm enough, and this year it's only slightly above normal, but it's plenty. Well, actually, in the Caribbean, it's actually cooled off. In the Gulf, it's a little bit above normal, but still, even with the Caribbean having cooled off temporarily a little bit, it's still plenty warm to support hurricanes. Normally, the storms that start in the Caribbean happen later in the year. Usually this time of year, we're starting to look, well, it's still July. Well, I shouldn't say that. Let me take that back. We're still looking close in until the Atlantic warms up, and we'll start looking farther out as we get farther into August and certainly September.
So I thought I'd add follow up there. People thanking for the expert knowledge you're providing.
Thank you, Gisela, from Facebook. Let's see. We have, how long have we been going here? We're going 50 minutes.
Yep.
Gordon, you have any other good ones before we've
answered a lot
wrap this
of
up?
them.
I feel really good. Again, if you have comments, folks, and suggestions for how we can use this tool, that we have here now that allows us to easily communicate with you, then we'd be anxious to hear from you on if you go to my Facebook page, which is facebook.com/. Bryan Norcross Weather. We're live on there right now, but if you put a comment in there, I'll get it more directly. But Jordan can accumulate the comments that we
Yeah.
have, that he has access to there, but I can only see the ones here that come in on my Facebook page.
We had one comment from Teresa mentioned Harvey, obviously a very famous storm
Harvey,
for a
yeah.
lot of
Well, so
people.
Harvey, there are lots of big lessons in Harvey, not just for Houston. I mean, in Harvey, we were reminded that Houston is placed in a terrible place to have a city. The ground is not absorbent for the water. It was built there, and then the drainage system was put in for a much smaller city. And then this megalopolis grew up there. And so it really is not designed well. And when the expressways were designed, they're designed to hold water and direct water. I mean, so the city in a big flood is kind of designed to shut down. But as we saw in Harvey, and it can't handle a lot of water because the water just doesn't soak in. It has to run off for the most part. So, but the other lesson of Harvey is that in the tropical zone with a slow moving storm, you can get these incredible rainfall amounts in the feet. And there's no place that can deal with that. You saw what a couple of feet did in North Carolina, but if you had couple feet of rain here in South Florida, as I mentioned earlier. You have the western sections, think generally west of I-95, underwater. That water would take a long time to go down. And how would we get around and how deal with people that are stranded and all those sorts of things. So yes, there are a lot of lessons to learn from hurricane, or in the case of Houston, tropical storm Harvey.
So a couple comments coming into your Facebook page. Gary said thank you, and then I have Kim. It looks like she mentioned it was in a poorly constructed condo complex in West Kendall for Andrew.
So you were in, no doubt, in poorly constructed. Yes. Well, a lot of folks in West Kendall. So Kendall, if you're not familiar with the Miami metropolitan area, Kendall is the big suburb to the southwest of downtown Miami, and it's a giant suburb. It's not the thing we call Kendall today Kendall has evolved over the years. Kendall used to go all the way to Biscayne Bay, and the eastern part of Kendall has become Pinecrest. And where the big Dadeland Mall complex, what today is downtown Dadeland, is kind of the eastern part of Kendall, but it goes all the way to the Everglades, and so it's a large area. Well, the street, which is an east-west street, 120th Street, goes right through the northern part of Kendall, I guess you'd say, and that was the dividing line for where the worst of Hurricane Andrew's damage is in the east, but the damaged corridor went a little north of due west as it went across. So folks that lived up to 110th Street or 100th Street even were in that damaged corridor. So all the way to the Everglades. So no doubt that's where the complex was that we're talking about. The good thing is that if that complex was severely damaged, which it sounds like it might have been, or destroyed, then it was rebuilt and with a strong building, because everything that has been built here since 1995 is very strong, and the stuff that has been built in the last 10 or 15 years is extraordinarily strong. So, we feel much better about the buildings and people staying in them than we did before Andrew. And actually, honestly, we felt pretty good about them then. And we had 15 people die in Andrew in South Florida in the storm. But looking at the damage, it was hard to believe that it was only 15. Obviously, it was a horrible thing for those people and those families. But I mean, from what happened, we had 120, 130,000 damaged buildings, 25 or 30,000 destroyed buildings. So it's kind of incredible what happened. And one of the big lessons from Andrew is you can survive wind. because of the folks that died, about half of them went out in the wind and did something they really shouldn't have done. They were got in a trailer or they got on a boat or some kind of thing like that. The other folks did not get into the center of the house, into the secure, core of the house, and something part of the house came apart, and that's how they died. So the wind is survivable, but you do have to be in an area where you're protected to add that layer of security.
All right, so we got time for maybe one or two more questions here. So if you have a question, please comment. We'll start with this one. We're going to stay in South Florida.
All right. How does it look for South Florida in the near future? Well, there's nothing pending. It's just going to be hot because the dry air is coming in. When the dry air comes in, we don't get the thunderstorms, which are sort of a blessing here in the summertime because it cools it off and we can make the evening quite wonderful. But with dry air moving in for the weekend now behind this tropical system, it's just going to be very, very sunny and very, very hot. But there is nothing pending at all related to the tropics.
Okay.
I lost your audio there for a second, Jordan. All right, I can see the question, but I can't hear you, Jordan.
Oh, there we go. There it is. You can hear me there. There we go.
Yeah,
So,
there I hear you. We ask everybody to take pictures and videos around it. Yes, so yeah, very, very, very good advice. Everybody should really do this when hurricane season starts, is take a picture of everything. If you have receipts, take pictures of the receipts, and then be sure those pictures, photos, whatever, are uploaded to your Apple Cloud or Google Cloud or your Google Drive or your Dropbox or what have you. In other words, don't have them physically, so that have them in a place that if the worst happens to your phone or your computer or your flash drive or whatever, that you haven't lost those pictures because they will be critical to recovering and dealing with insurance problems, which you can 100% guarantee we'll have after the next hurricane.
all right. I think that's it for today, Bryan.
All right. Well, thanks everybody, and we appreciate all the participation. And I feel like we've tested this thing out. We're going to actually try and expand it to other platforms here going forward, and our plan is to make use of this whenever there's a threat, so that we can be in better communications with everybody. The way the communication system has evolved. Well, when I did Hurricane Andrew, it was 33 years ago now, I stood in front of the green screen and they put a phone number up in the green screen and we just stood there talking. And now we have different technology, different era and so forth. So we're trying to adapt to that but get back to the ability to interact directly with people and understand what concerns and questions are as a storm is threatening or maybe even not threatening. So we can hope. All right, everybody, nothing in the works right now. We'll keep an eye on the Atlantic, but in reality, in a normal hurricane season, first hurricane doesn't even develop on average until August 11th. So we've gotten used to a different kind of season. This season is lining up to be something more like normal. So the fact that we're into August and it's been relatively calm is not unusual. So let's hope it stays that way for as long as possible. And we'll be in touch with you here on Facebook, YouTube, everything else, every other platform we can find, and of course on Fox Weather. I should mention, by the way, if you don't get Fox Weather, you don't know how to get it, just go to foxweather.tv and it'll tell you how to get it on your phone, your iPad, your television, your Roku, your Samsung TV, your LG TV, your cable system, or just about anywhere else. All right. Thanks to all of you. Appreciate it.